I remember the night of August 13th, 1961 very vividly. I was 10 years old at the time, and we had lots of visitors staying in our apartment from the eastern part of Germany. As they had come over the border, they would all tell us that something awful might happen. They didn't know when, but that it was imminent. And they saw barbed wire rolled up, and as a child, I had no idea of politics, but I knew the feeling of gloom that was in those people that were reporting that to our family. And indeed, that night the wall went up.
The attention of an anxious world is focused on East and West Germany and Berlin. East German troops swooped down on the border between Red Berlin and the Free City in the pre-dawn hours to close the 66 points where movement between the sectors has been relatively free. East Berliners who held coveted jobs in the West were told to stay home, and the elevated trains were halted. Mayor Willy Brandt, commenting on this latest Russian move in the war of nerves, cautioned East Berliners against revolt, exhorting them to do nothing rash. The mayor, along with other West Berlin authorities, feels that some minor incident might give East German and Soviet troops an excuse to oppress the people further. 2 battle-ready Soviet army divisions have ringed the city to bolster the army of the East German puppet government. Meanwhile, the Allies set to work immediately to draft a strong note of protest. Even when the corridor to Berlin was blocked and the Allies resorted to the famed airlift, free movement within the city was never interrupted. The Russians have told their people that the border was closed to prevent the infiltration of agents from the West. Never a word about those who fled to the arms of freedom, fled from the rule of guns and tanks that cast ominous shadows on the red side of freedom's border.
The wall really went through an interesting cycle. To begin with, of course, it wasn't there, and no one thought they would dare put up a wall. But when it came, people thought, well, it's probably going to be for just a short time. The hope was that the Americans would do something about it, and they didn't. And that was a great disappointment, especially to the East Germans.
We stood with open mouths in disbelief. A wall. We couldn't believe that. We said, no problem. The wall will stand until noon. By then, the Americans will have done something about it.
There was anger, there was sadness, there was frustration. In the beginning, we really thought that it could not last long. We hoped that it was something that the Western powers would not allow. The blockade had lasted about 1.5 years, and it was my opinion, when the wall was built, that it would only last a short time, because the Americans and other Western allies would find a way to make Berlin free again.
Daily, the harassment by the East Germans goes on. They have sealed off famed St. Hedwig's Cathedral, and West Germans can no longer worship at the church where their forefathers were christened and were buried. The communists have never learned that they can never erect a wall between the faithful and their God. The boots of East German soldiers on never-ending patrol sound a tattoo of oppression. Love conquers the old-brick wall. A young couple in East Berlin, separated from the bride's mother in the West, wave to the tearful woman. Scenes of heartbreak that are daily occurrence as families are torn apart by the wall of hate. The tears of a mother, the sadness of a bride. That is Berlin today.
I lived in East Germany long before the wall was put up, and even then, even as a child, I perceived that there was already, well, maybe not a wall, but a chasm would maybe be the better word, between the two sides. To live in the Russian sector, you were looked down upon, like, oh, they're over there with the Russians. You always kind of hoped that you could go over to the other side, even to do a little shopping. And you felt, oh, are they lucky to be on this side of that, really just a street where somebody said this is the border between East and West.
I had an uncle living in East Berlin, and they had the attitude that the wall never would come down.
Well, I was 20 years old when the wall was being built. At that time, I was living in a small town, some 100 kilometers away from Berlin. And then when I came to Berlin, that was in 1968, the wall was already there. So I took it as something natural. I had no relatives in West Berlin, so it didn't hurt me so much as other Berliners who had their aunt or their daughter or their father just living next door in West Berlin, and they couldn't visit each other anymore.
The most tragic part of it all was that a lot of people learned to accept the wall, even to the point of condemning those who were willing to risk their lives by trying to escape over the wall. They were willing to die for it. Many were willing to give the government the right simply to shoot those people. That was, for me, the greatest sign of inhumanity. I grew up in Berlin. The wall was part of the city. We didn't know anything else.
For me, it was almost like every day, you know, that wall is there, and it became a permanent fixture in my life. Yet when I talked to my parents, they would always say, this wall has got to come down. You know, something will have to happen. This can't go on forever.
Many of my relatives, none of them thought that it would ever come down. I said, have faith, you know, maybe it'll come down. They said, look, our parents had faith and they're dead now. The communists had such iron control. Everyone there felt like they were in a prison. The whole country was like a concentration camp to them.
As the communist barrier between East and West Berlin grows higher and stronger, the more determined grows the will of those in the East to escape. Smoke and tear gas bombs sometimes boomerang on the East German troops. It's like a deadly game of badminton. East Berliners who have apartments facing the border take the long chance when they get orders to leave their homes for the interior. While an East German guard attempts to yank her back to prison, West Berliners pull her to a fire net and freedom. The East Germans don't seem to have guards enough to plug every hole. When a soldier's attention is diverted by others, a hole is cut in the barbed wire and Khrushchev's face is slapped again. At times, the border guards seem to make but half-hearted attempts to stop their fleeing countrymen. They never use their guns within camera range, though there have been many reports of shootings. Maybe someday they too hope to sample the sweet taste of freedom.
In 1963, Kennedy was in Berlin and stood just down a ways from this point at Checkpoint Charlie and said to look forward to the day when the wall would come down.
So let me ask you as I close to lift your eyes beyond the dangers of today to the hopes of tomorrow. Freedom is indivisible, and when one man is enslaved, all are not free. When all are free, then we can look forward to that day when this city will be joined as one, and this country and this great continent of Europe in a peaceful and hopeful globe. When that day finally comes, as it will, the people of West Berlin can take sober satisfaction in the fact that they were in the front lines for almost 2 decades.
People always thought that cannot be it. That cannot be the end of it. There must be a day where they work something out.
In November of '89, when the wall opened up for the first time, the euphoria in Berlin was unbelievable. People would come across, they would just hug each other. West Berliners bought fruits, exotic fruits, with their own money, and as the cars went by, they would just hand out bananas to little children. Many of them had never seen or eaten bananas before. It was just fantastic.
On the evening when the wall opened, they showed it all on television as it happened. We sat in front of the TV and cried. The emotions were just overflowing.
For someone that experienced when the wall was built and suffered because of it for 40 years, it was an indescribable experience. It simply cannot be described. Euphoria is not the right word for it.
You see, this 9th of November 1989, it was a historic day, even for my own family. Everybody was exaggerated, of course. We were looking at the TV, and my two sons, they went, in the very night, they went to see their father, who was living in West Berlin, and whom they hadn't been able to see for quite a long time.
The 12 crossings up until now have been so frightening for me. You never know what to expect, and they really had me over the coals several times. And now to come back, this is my 13th trip, so lucky 13. To come back and walk freely back and forth, it's almost like the wall was never here.
When the wall came down, I realized that what my parents had always told me, that these folks are actually human beings that don't mean to kill other people. They were ordered to do that. And as a child, I was always really frightened by them carrying their guns and looking at me through their binoculars. When I saw them lift people over the wall, hugging each other, that was affirmed in my mind that these were just as human as I ever was.
If you look at the wall in retrospect, it did cause a barrier within people because it was unnatural. It made a barrier between people. It prevented them from communicating with each other and exchanging feelings. When the wall first fell, we believed at the beginning in our happiness that now everything was all right. We are one. We are free. And suddenly, we discovered that these barriers that we've built up over the past 40 years cannot be broken away in a short time.
This period of euphoria was very short. And after that, well, we here in East Berlin started to discover that people in West Berlin, they think different. And we too, we think different. And people over there, they just think in terms of money, how to make money, how to buy a big car, how to make their career.
This is something we have to ask ourselves. Is our freedom only materialistic freedom? The freedom to buy whatever we want? Or is it something more?
Now that the wall is down, there really is another wall within the people starting to go up. There's a very big difference between East Berliners and West Berliners. You can feel it, you can sense it. When you talk to him, oh, he's from East Berlin. And I think it's really a little bit like in the South and the North in America. We still have a few repercussions from the Civil War. And I have a feeling that this will remain for many, many years to come.
One could be under the impression that now an era of greatest bliss and joy would begin. This was not the case. But reality caught up with us quickly. Just as the wall fell, the trench between the West and the East deepened. Now, the trench is deeper than the wall was high.
I dislike actually to call it unification. To me, it's rather a kind of occupation, you see. I was one to be against the unification. I don't like this great Germany we have now. You know, there are many people like me. I feel I'm not a German to such an extent. I feel I'm sort of a stateless person.
The vision that brought the wall down really needs to continue in order to overcome the last chasms that are still between the two Germanys. There are people at work that are trying to overcome that chasm, or that other secondary wall, the spiritual wall, maybe, so to speak. Only if people are at work in that respect can Germany really be reunited.
West of the wall, I'll wait for you. West of the wall, our dreams can all come true.